Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Azure podcast. Today, we are recording episode number 478 on November 6th. Our special guests today are Nithya Sivam and Joshua Min, and they're going to be talking to us about the Help API. And I know that sounds a little bit odd, but we'll explain more what that means when we get to them, because I think you're going to really appreciate it. So before we get into them introducing themselves, Sajid, Kale, what do you have for news today?
I got a few things here. So the first one is, and these are up on the blog, so we'll put these in the link dump. But basically, there's a couple of articles here, well, two of them here specifically around, you know, realizing potential like Azure optimization things, basically. And I know we've talked about this in past
Is this
podcasts,
cost
but
cost type stuff, Kale, or is this like scaling, or what's the?
yeah, so it's everything.
Okay.
So it does include cost management and stuff that we've talked about before. It also talks about the well-architected framework.
Love it.
It talks
Okay.
about the cloud adoption framework. So it's basically like a kind of one-stop kind of post to check out all the different areas you should be considering to optimize your cloud spend. As you said, your scaling, things like that, reservations, savings plans, all kinds of things. It's kind of like a really nice kind of wrapped up post about all that piece, and then as well as the Microsoft Unified support scenarios and things like that. So that's really cool. Nice little wrap up there for that one. And then there's another one. Yeah, we have to talk about AI. It's kind of like we used to talk about blockchain. Now we got to talk about AI every time. But no, there's a good one out here about generative AI. Again, talking about it's a follow on to a previous blog we had about specifically in Azure, the Azure AI, how LLM life cycles work, building on these things, all the different kind of augmented tools that we have inside of there, fine tuning tools for LLMs, all the semantic kernel, all the different pieces that we have there. Again, bringing together a bunch of different AI technologies that we've done. So if you're getting started in the space, especially around AI, and want to learn a little bit more about what Azure's doing in that space, I know we've talked about this in the past, but this is a good one to has a lot of spider webs out to a lot of different things we have there.
Great.
And then the last one I had was it's actually happening this week. So there's a KubeCon and Cloud Native Con going on, I believe in Chicago this week. And we're recording this on the 6th, and this is to the 9th. There's several Azure specific things there around Kubernetes and our open source initiatives around, Kubernetes in that space with KubeCon. And so there's some meetups and things going on there, as well as some learning opportunities, booths, swag. So anybody in that area, or I'm sure you can get some of this stuff online as well. Just wanted to call that one out that that's happening this week.
Great. Yeah, Kendall would be super excited. I'm sure
Yeah,
she is.
actually, the Azure Day is today, the day we're recording. So we'll put a link to the recordings of that Azure Day, all the Azure Day sessions, along with the show notes. But that's something to watch out for.
Great. Cool. Yeah, I just had a couple of smaller things. We had some updates for the Elastic SAN, or Azure Elastic SAN, right? The ability to take snapshots, some new security capabilities. And again, this is really targeted at scenarios where on premises you would have had a traditional SAN. And even though I remember when we first talked about this product, it seems like that would have gone away in the days of cloud storage. The reality is there's lots of scenarios where that's still very valuable. Speaking of AKS, the Azure Container Storage went public preview now, and this is basically allows you to make it easier to manage your persistent volumes. The App Gateway just announced IPv6 support, and again, we've been talking about IPv6 for I don't know, years, decades now. It is a thing. You should be adopting it. It's going to become more and more prevalent. Lots of government agencies are requiring it these days. And then the last thing, and we'll probably do a whole show on this because I think this is an area we're investing a ton of work and there's a lot of benefit for customers. But Azure Advisor now has come out with some recommendations around using your disks with zone redundant configurations. Remember, Advisor is about telling you, sort of the best way to configure resources, and we're investing heavily in that. And like I said, we'll probably do a whole show on that at some point because there's a ton of work going into that. And so with that, let's transition over to Nithya and to Joshua. Nithya, Joshua, if you could introduce yourselves and tell us what you do here at Microsoft.
Sure, I can go first. First of all, thank you, Evan, Kale, and Sujit for the introduction, and for giving us this opportunity to talk about Help API on Azure Podcast. So my name is Nithya Shivam, and I'm a senior product manager in Azure's Incident Care and Experiences organization. Our mission, for me and my entire team, is to enable all our Azure customers and partners with all the tools that are needed to troubleshoot and get resolution to their Azure issues from anywhere, whether they are inside or outside the portal. Um I'll 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 give it over to Joshua.
Hey, thanks, Nithya. So my name is Joshua Min. I am basically Nithya's counterpart on the engineering side. I manage the Help RP team in the CXP organization within Microsoft. So my team empowers 1P and 3P clients with APIs that provide programmatic access to self-help solutions through ARM.
Great. Yeah. So just to sort of put some context around this, because I personally I'm super excited about the capabilities that y'all are releasing for general consumption, because we've had a lot of this internally, and we've had some of this as deflection flows and whatnot when you're going through the portal. But this is expanding this out to everybody else, right? This is giving customers through a lot of different flows the ability to access the self-help content that we have. Is that sort of the right way to think about this?
Yeah, exactly. So today, you exactly framed it right. Like we have a lot of our troubleshooting experiences for our customers goes within the portal, but we've also, upon talking to our partners, we found out that a good majority of our customers want the troubleshooting experiences from their own tools and their own integrations. So this is providing all the solutions that 1P customers or our direct customers can access through the portal. Outside of this, via Help API through and accessible to all the 3P customers too.
And so would I be, give me an example of the kind of things that I can surface. I believe there's deflection, kind of what we call self-help articles that'll point you to based on the what you're looking at. How do what other kinds of things can I access through this API? Do the guided troubleshooters show up through this? What are the capabilities that I could surface?
Yeah, great question. So today the Help API will showcase all kinds of solutions that are available in the portal, primarily diagnostics. So diagnostics is nothing but it evaluates based on the resource, and based on the resource of the customer, it analyzes the root cause and provides the exact steps to troubleshoot the issue. So that's diagnostics. And then we also provide solutions, which is also a wide range of solutions, which has multiple different solution components containing diagnostics, troubleshooters, metrics charts, all of that, and all of that compiled within one single pane to provide more insightful solutions. And then we also separately showcase guided troubleshooters as well. So today it's just these three because we've deemed that these three are the most impactful solutions, but we do have the potential to support more solution types in the future.
Yeah, just to add to what Nithya said, basically the solutions that you see through the portal, most of those solutions are available through our API. So it's programmatic access. So you're basically getting the articles, you're getting the step-by-step instruction on how to resolve your Azure resource issues, but through an API.
You know what would help me is to take a concrete example, right? Like let's take a service, for example. Let's take, I don't know, app service, right? I know that's the one that probably has a lot of these troubleshooters built in. So I know an app service, I believe there's you're talking of in the diagnose and troubleshoot pane. I forget what the pane is called or what the page is called in the portal experience. But when I go in there, there's a bunch of kind of things that could potentially be wrong with the service, and I could ask it to evaluate if I can't connect to it remotely, or the certificates are not available, or whatever it may be the case, right? Are we talking about those? I just want to make sure I understand which part of the portal we're referring to here.
Yeah, so the portal, just to kind of take a step back, the portal has multiple different experiences. And one of Diagnose and Solve is one of the experiences. And again, today, just for context, all of these experiences are powered by Help API today in the portal as well. So, and the second experience is, the help, the case submission where customers can have open support tickets. And then the third experience is Help 2.0. Now, when we showcase these solutions outside of the portal, this is an API that is just very specific to self-help solutions. So we are not showcasing that as a standalone experience. We're not showcasing these solutions within a standalone experience, but basically based on the inputs that the customer provides. Let's say the customer says, this is my problem, and here is my problem classification, and this is my resource. Based on these inputs, we look at our downstream services, look at what are the possible potential solutions, and return the most relevant solutions to the customer.
I see. So they would get that in the form of you call an API with those inputs, is what you're saying.
Correct.
And you get back, I guess, a structured response that they would then
Yes.
parse apart and display to the end user in whatever system they are. Like, I don't know if it's like a ServiceNow portal or whatever else, other portal. Is that what we're looking at? Is that the kind of main use case for externalizing this Help API now?
Absolutely. So I think just to go one step further here, there are two main steps. It's a two-step process here. The first, in the first process, customers can identify, or we call it discover, solutions that based on their problem and their resource or their subscription. And once they identify that, okay, here's 3 solutions, out of that, solution A, solution B is the relevant solution, then the next step is to execute that solution. And the execution of solution is what actually gets you the diagnostics or the troubleshooting, step-by-step troubleshooting instructions, or the actual list of solutions that you can use to solve your Azure issue.
This may get a little bit too techy, but like when we talk about the self-help content, as far as here's an article to go read based on your problem state, or we've detected this thing that's wrong with your resource based on the input, and you should go do X. That makes total sense to me. But like things like the guided troubleshooter, that's an interactive, sort of do a step, you get some sort of feedback, do a step. How do I actually integrate that with my API? Do I have to build a UI to do this? Is there, maybe a React, component that I just integrate, and then all I have to do is embed it in my app? How does that part end up working?
I think so. The guided troubleshooters, you're absolutely right. So the way it works is yeah, you're right. So the inputs, it's a combination of the inputs that the customer gives, and it takes the results from the previous response along with backend signals from the resource, and kind of computes then the next steps.
So it does do iteratively then as I
yes, it's iterative and it's interactive.
Gotcha.
And that said, the rendering of these solutions and the steps is much better when there is a UI that's in front of this. But it can be also done through any of these, any of the API interfaces as well, like Postman or PowerShell, or any type of interface.
That would be, no, I just got to say, as someone who's in this business, and you're trying to put me out of this business, by the way, thank you very much for putting me out of business. But as someone who spends their life troubleshooting, like I'm sitting here thinking, man, that's like hardcore if you're trying to call a help API with Postman or something. That's serious at that point.
Yeah, so one follow-on question to this, you've been mentioning like diagnostics and things that come along with this, and maybe this is me being naive to how this service works, but like, for instance, taking Sajid's example, let's say I have, I don't know, SSL misconfigured or something, or I did something bad like that. From a customer's perspective, when they come into this, do they have to enable stuff like because like diagnostics and some of the events and stuff that's happening in my Azure stuff, that's in Azure Monitor, right? Like I have some stuff over there. is this something like in addition to that where I'm going in and asking for help on this thing, or is this thing gonna fly into action when I do have these errors? Like what triggers the start of this, the where they get the event stream from to say, hey, I got this problem, you know?
So that's a great question. So our help API is a very dynamic. You can integrate it anywhere. So some of the customers would want that to be reactive, but we can also integrate it with observability tools or any type of logging tools, and trigger this based on thresholds or alerts that you set in within your system. Um, yeah, so I think to answer your question, we have the potential of integrating API, help API both proactively and reactively.
And just to add to that, depending on the diagnostic that you choose to run, those diagnostics are developed by Azure engineers, and each diagnostic is a little different at what signals that it looks for in order to troubleshoot the issue that you have.
That takes me to sort of a follow-up on, it sounds like one of the key use case scenarios would be, surfacing these in something like ServiceNow or some other, or PagerDuty, some other third-party incident management tool. Are we working with those third-party providers to sort of build a really rich experience with them at that point, or is the goal to present the API and then everybody has to adopt it and evolve it themselves?
We are working with some of the third-party tools, and ServiceNow is a great example here. That said, we are not limiting ourselves there. We are also working with a lot of other resellers, cloud resellers, and CSPs and MSPs as well.
Oh,
But-
because they would have scenarios too. Yeah, that's a
Correct.
good point. Yeah, I forgot about that.
So yes, so it's not just limited there, but we're also expanding and talking to a lot of other resellers that are interested in integrating with us.
Great.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to ask the question. I work with a lot of FSI customers, right? And they're typically the top tier banks and capital markets and whatnot. And they are, I can see that they have a lot of internal tools, I guess, right, that kind of encapsulate what Azure offers, right? Like they typically hide all like nobody sees the portal, right? Basically, it's like here's our portal, and that's all you're going to see, right? And then through ARM and automation and whatnot, they do a lot of stuff in Azure. So I can see a place where they would want to integrate these tools, right? Because obviously, you've used the Azure portal to deploy something to Azure and it's not working. They need a way to troubleshoot it. So I can see that them being a prime customer for this. What's the criteria for them to get onboarded onto this? Obviously this is not something we're going to just make available to everybody. I'm guessing there is a certain procedure to get onboarded onto this API.
So today the API is free of cost, and anyone can use this API.
Told you, she's trying to put me out of business. Like that's her goal.
Forget it. You better put your resume out there. Right?
I'll have to go learn how to write code instead of just debugging code.
So the criteria to get these solutions is that so today the APIs support any issue at the subscription or the resource scope. In the future, we're going to onboard, of course, more scenarios at a much higher tenant level. So the minimum criteria is you need to be a reader at the resource. So if you're a direct customer, then you need to be a reader at the resource or the subscription scope. And if you are like an indirect user, like a cloud service provider, as I mentioned, then you need to kind of have an access, or you need to be enabled on that subscription or resource, which many of our CSPs have access that we have spoken to. They have access, but they could be edge case scenarios that we are trying to work out as well. But some of the CSPs that we've already spoken to, they can access their customers' subscription. So that's kind of the minimum requirement to use these APIs.
I see. So your existing So your existing Azure credentials is what is used to authenticate access to the APIs, help APIs itself.
Correct.
you probably have to set up a role or something like that, and they get
Yes.
access to it. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. Sorry.
Yeah. So along with these API calls, typically these things start out simple and then get really complex. So that's just been my history with APIs. But yeah, to that point, is there like repos or examples? I mean, obviously we have references for our APIs that tell what parameters you feed in, what you're going to get back, these kind of things. But as far as like examples for these kind of things, is there anything like in a way of like a GitHub or any of that kind of stuff that you could that helps users get started with this, or?
Yes, I can take that question. So we have very good documentation on learn.microsoft.com. Um, uh, all the APIs, all the resource providers have their documentation there. We're no exception. So there's some sample response and request code out there. So I definitely recommend everyone to who's interested in our API go out to the site and just read our documentation there. So yeah, so we do have sample code out there.
And I assume this is not just pure REST clients, right? You probably have SDKs for like different languages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yes, we have
We do.
SDKs in Java, .NET, Go, Python, as well as, did I mention JavaScript? JavaScript. We also have Azure CLI command, as well as a PowerShell commandlet as well. And those links to those modules and commands and SDKs are out on the documentation site.
I want to go back to your statement about sort of being able to, you have to have a read role on one of the
Mhm.
resources. So does that mean that generally you would expect this to work in sort of the really typical scenario we see where team one owns, say, the network, and they own the express route gateway, and they own the hybrid connectivity back on premises, they own the virtual network, the NICs, and then team two might be deploying a virtual machine into that network, or they might be deploying an application on top of the virtual machine. Does that imply generally that I have read access to those resources, so I'd be able to use this capability, or is that something we need to go figure out, like that I have to get granted that capability to be able to use it in that scenario?
It's not
So-
always the case, Evan, from what I know. When the way that these companies do separation of duty,
Right.
So typically the folks that are doing deployment, they can they'd be using certain service principals and whatnot to deploy, and those
Right.
service principals under the covers may have access, but they themselves, the operator,
Okay.
perhaps
Okay.
does not have the right permissions to
Okay.
read that. That's how I've seen it. Yeah.
So is there a custom role then that I can add so that I have the ability to do this while I, if I don't necessarily have direct rights to the resource? Or is that a scenario we still need to go figure out?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, these are scenarios we are trying to learn ourselves. We are on the learning path.
Fair.
We just
Totally
released
fair.
we just released our API like last month, and we are trying to learn different scenarios as well. So yes,
Okay.
yeah, and as we learn, we're trying to update our documentation as well to the best possible extent for our customers.
Yeah, because that separation of access is, I mean, it makes
Yes.
these environments super complicated for
Yeah.
sure. So, okay, great.
I could definitely see a scenario where they would need a special service principal that does have like a reader rule across the entire scope of whatever the subscription or the resource group or whatever level they decide to take it to, and then
Awesome.
that's the one that would be making the help API
Right.
calls right on behalf of the user. So typically they might set up something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, Joshua, Nithya, this was great. Again, I'm a little bit nervous here because this is what I do for a living. So, I'm a little worried we're competing with each other here. No, but I joke. We actually leverage a lot of this stuff internally as well, and these diagnostics are super, super helpful. Anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure to call out for our audience?
I think this was great. I just one thing I wanted to call out, and again, we are having a lot of new exciting features that we are adding as well. And like I mentioned, we're adding more insightful solution types, as well as we are also bringing in natural language capabilities, and we want to
Oh,
make
there's our AI reference.
exactly. Yeah. So we're planning to add these capabilities and make it much easier for users, so they don't there's a number of steps that they have to go through to get these solutions is much more simplified as we go by. So that's one thing that's one exciting thing to look forward to for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
mean,
but
oh, go ahead, Sujit.
I'm waiting for the day. We have all these models in OpenAI, right? And I'm waiting for the day they come up with the Evan Basilic model. So that's the one that I would use then to solve all these problems.
They're trying to figure out how to do the complaint stuff, and it's
Yeah,
difficult,
exactly. Yeah,
man.
yeah,
It
yeah.
varies too
Blah.
much. It's really
Yeah,
hard.
yeah. Thanks, Gail. Love you too, man. Yeah, no, I think at a high level, I just want to reinforce for everybody how well integrated these capabilities are to in the platform, right? We've all had these TSGs that we've gone through for years, and even we used to use this in Azure, but they're very disconnected from reality, right? You're sort of following instructions, or you're leveraging a tool that isn't, it might pull some data, but it's not really, it's difficult to make it smart enough really to respond to what's there. This deflection content that the guided troubleshooters, all that, it's using the real state of your app at the current time and place. So this is such super powerful technology. It's great to see it get exposed to our customers as well.
I just thought of one thing. You mentioned earlier, I think Nithya, Joshua mentioned this, that there is the help API. There's also the functionality to open up cases, right? I think case management, or to open up a ticket. Is that also part of this API? Is that separate, or is there a separate API for that? Where, like suppose they go through all these troubleshooting, okay, nothing is working, right? Next step is open up a case, right? And is that also automated, or is there a way to automate that as well?
There is a separate API for that, and it's already in public preview. I
It's
think
been around for a couple of years now, I think, right?
Yeah, it's been there for some time.
I see. Okay,
Yes.
good. So that kind of ties
Yeah.
it up together to make a holistic solution for the customer.
Yeah, and I think that's our vision too, right? Like, I mean, at this time, it's two different APIs, but we definitely are designing these APIs with a complete view, the holistic view of providing that end-to-end experience for our customers. So if they still want to open a support ticket, they do have everything they have to, and they don't have to go through repetitive steps again.
Right, all the context is flowing automatically from the troubleshooters to the ticket, and it goes automatically. That makes sense.
Exactly. That's what we're aiming for. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Phew. Okay, so I still have some business for a little while before we build it. Okay, great. No, again, both of you, appreciate you very much coming on. I think this is something that definitely encourage customers to check out. Right, it will save them trouble in the end for sure. Right, it'll help them find their problems. Kale, Sujit, anything last you want to leave with?
No, thanks for coming up with this. I'm sure our customers are going to appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Great.
So much.
Thanks, folks.
Thank
See y'all later.
Thank you.
Thank you.